So, there's a new national security strategy out, and if you've been following the news, you've probably heard one story, that the US is backing down. But what if that's not the whole picture? We're going to dive into what the document actually says and see how it stacks up against the headlines.
Right off the bat, you've got heavy hitters like the Wall Street Journal setting the scene. The narrative is that the administration is going soft, pulling its punches and easing up on China.
Then you have the New York Times basically singing the same tune. They're calling superpower competition a missing chapter. So the message here is pretty clear. The US is supposedly dropping the ball on its rivalry with Beijing.
And Bloomberg comes in and really rounds out this consensus. Their take? The strategy is busy yelling at allies instead of confronting America's real adversaries. The picture they're painting is of a US in retreat, one that's downgrading the threat from China.
But that brings up a really important question, doesn't it? Do these headlines actually reflect what's inside the document? Is the US really caving, or is there another story hiding in plain sight?
Well, to find out, the source we're looking at points to a really surprising place. The document's intense focus on our own backyard, the Western Hemisphere. They've even coined a term for it, the Dawn Row Doctrine. And this, they say, is the first major clue to what's really going on.
Okay, so let's do a super quick history lesson here. The original Monroe Doctrine was a huge deal in US foreign policy. It basically told European powers, hey, the Americas are our sphere of influence, stay out. Now, this wasn't about hiding from the world. It was about securing and strengthening America's own neighborhood. So, the argument from our source is that this new strategy is basically a modern reboot of that same idea. It's not a retreat. Instead of telling European colonial powers to back off, this new Dawn Row Doctrine is all about countering Chinese influence right here in the Americas.
And you know what? The document's own language seems to totally back this up. It specifically says the goal is a hemisphere free of hostile foreign incursion. And when the text starts talking about debt traps and espionage from foreign powers, well, it's not too hard to guess which hostile foreign power they have in mind.
And this all starts to make a lot of sense when you look at what China has actually been up to in the region. Getting control of ports, building satellite stations that could be used for military purposes, and even allegedly getting involved with drug cartels. So from this angle, securing America's backyard isn't a retreat, it's step one in a much bigger plan to push back against China.
Okay, but it's not just about the Americas. Not by a long shot. According to our source, the strategy also signals a huge pivot right into China's neighborhood, the Asia-Pacific.
I mean, the language in this thing is, well, it's blunt. It flat out calls past US policy of opening up markets to China a mistake. It accuses some American elites of being China's enablers, and it makes a direct promise to stop China from dominating Taiwan and the South China Sea. This is not soft language, this is confrontation.
And this isn't just talk. They're putting some serious money where their mouth is. We're talking about a proposed $1 trillion defense budget. That's a staggering number, and it's hardly what you'd expect from a country that's supposedly backing away from global competition. And then you look at what's happening on the ground. The US has been conducting military tests just 70 miles off the coast of Taiwan. 70. And it's still sending weapons to the island. Let's be real. Those are not the actions of a country that's trying to de-escalate.
Which brings up a huge logical hole in the media's story, right? The strategy document actually goes after European allies for being too cozy with China and Russia. So if the US were really retreating and going soft on China, why on earth would it be pressuring its allies to get tougher? It just doesn't add up.
So, what is going on here? Why is there such a massive gap between the headlines we're all reading and the actual words written in the strategy document?
Well, the source we're looking at has a name for this phenomenon. They call it the Trump distortion field. The idea is that some in the media are so focused on a particular negative narrative that it becomes almost impossible to see the actual policy for what it is.
So, to be really clear, what the source is arguing is that this isn't just some innocent mistake or misreading. The claim is that by pushing this soft on China story, the media is effectively amplifying talking points that benefit Beijing, all while ignoring the very hawkish anti-China language that's right there in the text.
Now, it's really important to say, the source isn't just blindly defending this policy. In fact, they offer some pretty sharp criticisms of their own, arguing that the strategy has some major blind spots.
So while they agree with the overall anti-China direction of the strategy, they have huge problems with specific decisions.
Things like not banning TikTok or letting companies like NVIDIA sell advanced computer chips to China.
And the worry here is that these specific decisions are basically kneecapping the entire strategy. Letting a platform like TikTok operate is seen as handing China a cognitive warfare weapon. And selling them advanced chips, that's seen as directly fueling the very technology that makes China's military stronger and deadlier.
All right, so let's pull all of this together. We've looked past the headlines, we've dug into the document, so what's the real story here?
The big takeaway from this analysis is that far from being a retreat, this national security strategy is actually a massive strategic realignment against China. It's a plan that starts in our own hemisphere and pushes back all the way into the Asia-Pacific.
And what's more, the source sees this as part of a bigger trend. This isn't some radical new idea, but a continuation of the tougher stance on China that we've seen building across both the previous Trump and the current Biden administrations. It's actually a rare bit of bipartisan agreement.
And all this leaves us with one final and maybe the most important question. This whole deep dive has been about the clash between a government document and the news headlines about it. It really makes you think, when policy and headlines are telling two completely different stories, how do any of us figure out what's really going on?